5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's going live now. All right, good morning, everybody. LPP, Tim here, and we are Saturday live with another special guest. Mr. Night Owl is here with us today. Good morning, Night Owl.
Hi there, folks.
We've got Rune, good morning. Anthony, good morning. Let's see, GK Man. We've got who else? Well, Night Owl we know is here. Ronald, good morning. Starry Lock, Miko Wolf, good morning. Let's see. Alrighty. All right, so okay. Anthony says audio and video are great for both. Awesome. Excellent. All right. So we've got another day of having more than just me here, and we're going to do a little study session today. But first off, Night Owl, thank you for being here. And I know it's early for the both of us, but I appreciate you getting up and getting logged in here and coming to join in this side with us. You're almost always in the chat with us, but I think it's kind of a treat for other viewers out there to be able to hear you and see your workbench again. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. So you had mentioned the other day that you wanted to focus a little bit on some automotive stuff. I have to start off by admitting that I don't normally do a whole lot of automotive work. Being in New York City, mostly in Manhattan and Brooklyn, there's just not a ton of cars around. I mean, there's a lot of cars around for the road capacity, but there's not a lot of automotive service work being done. And where there is, there's a handful of places that are tied into like AAA and all of that do the bulk of the work. So usually when I have to, when someone calls me to do some automotive work, it's mostly like they walk in and say, hey, I need a copy of the key to my truck or my car or something. Like I get local police officers coming in like, hey, can you just run off a copy of my car key? Yeah, sure, no problem. Or if it's more modern, my shop doesn't have a ton of like the latest and greatest programming equipment. So we frequently have to refer people to the handful of shops in the area that we do know have the up-to-date transponder things.
Gotcha.
Every so often we do have things like one of our like really frequent customers who comes in all the time for like everything because they're one of our major commercial accounts. They'll come in and be like, hey, my father has a truck and he's saying that his key wasn't working reliably anymore. Can you take a look at it, see if you can do something? And obviously it's this really, really worn key.
Right.
Well, yeah, I've got the blanks for it. And, you told me the make, model, and year. I can get the blanks for it. And I know the code series that it should be in. Just leave the key here and I'll see what I can do. And in this case, it was, forget exactly what type of, I think it was a Chevy. And what I was able to do was with my calipers, I took measurements of the identifiable cuts. This was a really, really worn key. So there were a couple of places on the key where I could not determine whether or not it was actually where the cut was.
Mm-hmm.
but I took measurements of what I could determine, looked up the code series, found the actual depth and space for it, and then I was able to use HPC code source, which has a really useful function for situations like this, where what you can do is you can actually search by bidding within a code series, and you don't actually have to have the complete bidding. You just have to put in as much as you can, and
That's cool.
the more depths that you can put in, the fewer possibilities that you have. And so I managed to narrow it down to like 2 or 3 possible keys.
Okay.
And said, well, I think this is it. Try it out, and if it doesn't work, come back tomorrow. Let me know it doesn't work, and it's going to be the other one, and I'll make that for you.
Gotcha. So there's basically, like, in my study guide, it discusses having like some of the old progression books, or it does discuss like the code source software. But basically what it is knowing like the code, and all these manufacturers, for the people who don't know, all the manufacturers would basically put a list of their biddings out there associated with the code, or have some sort of formula there where the blind code uh, lines up with the bidding code. And so if you can determine parts of the bidding, either from reading the cylinder, or reading a worn out key like you just described, you can actually determine and progress the cuts that you don't have in order to make it work. Um, which, from what I've learned, the little bit of automotive stuff that I've learned, mostly from that study guide, is that you don't have to have or that not all cuts on the key are used for all locks in all cases. So like your door lock would have, it would only use like the first 5 wafers, or the first 5 cuts on a key, and then your ignition lock would use like cuts 4 through 7, or 8, or whatever. Is that correct in my understanding?
Yeah, that's the general thing. Is and obviously, which cuts and how many cuts vary from manufacturer to manufacturer and series to series. So like Ford, for instance, with their 8-cut system, the first 6 from the tip to basically the middle of the key, that was for the doors, and then like the last 3 close to the bow were for the ignition. And
Okay.
their 10-cut system, each one used 6 cuts, and they only overlapped right in the middle. So it was 1 through 6 was your doors, and 5 through 10 was your ignition.
Gotcha. Okay.
Um,
I mean, I think
the really old stuff, they had a whole different system, but it operated on similar principles.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think on the test, what they're from what I'm gathering, is they're basically wanting you to know about where you can look, what kind of tools you can use to uh decode the lock. Not necessarily how to do it, or testing you on, okay, if you had this tool, how would you use it. They don't do that, but I think it would be more of a question of knowing where to get the information, um as far as getting that code information to be able to produce a working key.
So, like, it's actually a lot easier today because frequently, if you have, that full collection of leashy tools, really replaces a lot of the different tools that you used to have to carry around. Back in the day, there was the easy reader and the determinator were two very similar styles of tools, but they obviously were different in design, but they good one, Jason. But they worked on similar principles, which was variations on wafer reading, and actually those very similar to how those wafer key sets I sent you a bit ago worked, where you pick the lock and then you use a depth guide or a feeler to determine the relative heights of the different wafers.
Right.
But that required you to be able to pick the lock.
Right. And with most automotive locks, they are sidebar locks, and it is extremely difficult to get to the sidebar. You either use a specialized little shim that you can go down in there, or you have to pretty much in most cases, you have to remove whatever it is that holds the ignition lock in place in the column or the dashboard, which requires a lot of know-how, and I've never done anything like that. I know Jason's probably his most popular video was one of his first showing removing the ignition from a Jeep, and that's something like that is I don't have the ability to practice that at the moment.
Yeah, that's one of those things where you kind of have to have either the service manuals or there are some special resources out there that are unfortunately largely unavailable to students because they're sold through locksmith supply companies that in order to buy stuff from them, you have to have an account with them, and getting an account with them means that you have to have your license and other documentation that you can send them and say, yeah, I'm legit, which makes it kind of one of those chicken and egg sort of problems.
Right.
But there are books out there that kind of the unfortunate thing is that they tend to be older books, not a ton of like really up-to-date ones being put out every year that you can look at, how to service various things. And then there are like if you're really in that particular section of the trade, there are books that you can get, and like every couple of years they'll come out with the hey, here's how you service all the cars manufactured in this particular year.
Right. Yeah, and I see LockPicking's gal. She might be one as well. She said she changed out her husband's ignition. So yeah, that is that's something I've never done. I've got my old car sitting out here, and I'm half tempted to tear it apart because I doubt I'll ever get it fixed up. But I don't know. I'm not resorting to that just yet. But anyway, so yeah, let's for the folks here, Night Owl, just maybe real quickly, maybe kind of share with people, because I'm not sure everybody's heard it, or I know you've mentioned it in chats before and here and there, but kind of how was it that you fell into locksmithing and got into it? What kind of brought you into it?
Yeah. So what got me started actually was actually I've told this story a few times, but I don't think I've ever done it before a big audience. But so I live in New York City, and I back in when I was in high school and stuff, I got involved in sort of the local hacker scene. Um, and if you're not familiar with it, there is a magazine called 2600, the Hacker Quarterly. They've been running since 1984, and they put out this little magazine. People submit articles, and it's all very old school, community run sort of thing. But they also have a conference that happens every 2 years, and I finally went to my first one of these conferences, and the conference is called Hope, or Hackers on Planet Earth, and
Okay.
and they, back when you could actually have things in person, they would basically take over this kind of seedy hotel in Midtown Manhattan for the weekend. And they would have all sorts of different things you could go and do. And they had people that were teaching you how to solder and microelectronics and computer programming and all sorts of things, in addition to people giving talks on. You're right, Jason. The salsa commercial did not do us any favors. But they would have.
I was just getting ready to talk that. Yeah.
But they'd have all sorts of things over the course of the weekend, and a few years before I went, a couple of people from Europe came over, Barry Wells, John Wilhelm, and a few others, who had started this organization in the Netherlands called Tool, the Open Organization of Locksport. And they did a couple of talks at this conference about impressioning and locksport and that sort of thing. And they met up with some American people who were interested in doing that, Skylar Town and Deviantolf and a few others. And they got to talking, and after a while, the Europeans said, hey, if you're really interested in doing this, you can start an American branch of Tool, and you can be in charge of that. And so they did. And the year that I went to this conference for the first time was basically one of the first years that the newly established American branch of Tool was running the Locksport stuff at this conference. And I was just there sort of checking things out, didn't really know anyone, but I wandered into their lockpick village, which was just this area with a bunch of tables, locks and picks spread all over the place, and just this like one corner where people were giving a little basic introductory lecture. And so I sat through this like 15-minute talk on the basics of how to pick a lock, and I spent most of the weekend there.
Cool.
Just sat there, had a lot of fun, bought my first set of picks, some of which I actually still have somewhere. And so for a number of years, that was basically just what I did. I would show up at these conferences, learn a bit while I was there, and I just practiced. And as time went on, I got more and more into the details, really studying locks, how they work, and developing my picking skills. This was back when forums like LockPicking 101 were really active. And so I'd hang out on there. I'd start some threads, write little explainers on something that I had figured out. And that just kept me going. And after a number of years, I was like, I should really, I should totally get my locksmith license so I can really, if nothing else, so I can get access to all the cool tools and references and things I can't get as just some guy.
Right.
And, just so I have something.
Stuff like you were just talking about just a minute ago. Yeah.
Because at the time I was working as an IT contractor, and that's what I had spent most of my life up to that point, working towards getting myself set up as an IT contractor, and that was finally paying off, and I was making decent money and all. But I just had a series of really, really terrible jobs that left me with a debilitating panic disorder, to the point where I could not leave my apartment for days at a time. And just like going anywhere, doing anything was impossible. And so that was really great for me being able to put out lots of videos and spend a lot of time online talking to people and all that. But it meant that I couldn't work, and I was really getting to the point where it's like, I don't want to be in this line of work anymore.
Right.
And that got me to be like, okay, I should really, I've been for years. I should, when I have the free time, I should, try and get my license and do that. But now I obviously need to change careers. And I found that one of the local community colleges that I could get to relatively easily did have a locksmith training program, and that I could take basically for free, because it's local community college and all that.
That's cool.
And so I decided I'd go and try it out, and I went through that, and I ended up, it was a little bit funny, because in a lot of the lessons I ended up knowing about as much as the instructor, and but I had a good time. I was able to sort of mentor some of the other people who were much newer to the trade, and I had a good time. And a few weeks after the program ended and I got my certificate, I was able to go down to my local licensing bureau and fill out the paperwork, and got my license, and then started gearing up, getting my key machines and all the real tools of the trade beyond just having a nice pick set. And, as I was gearing up, friends of mine would be like, "Oh, hey, you know this stuff. I'm having trouble. I'm locked out of my house, or my apartment door's kind of wonky. Can you come take a look?" And small jobs like that. And and of course, I was still involved with Tool, and after a couple of years of that, had a guy attend a couple of the Tool meetings, and he said, like, "Hey, you know, I'm a locksmith here in New York City. You know, if you and sometimes I need a bit of help. And actually, you know, you have a blitz, right? You know how to calibrate them. You have the tools for it and all. Because the blitz in our shop is really old and it's not working right. Can you come in and take a look?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. You know, I'll grab my calibration kit and I'll come in." And I go into his shop, go fix up his blitz, which it was in a bad way. Like literally,
Right.
it had gotten to the point where the guy before him, instead of calibrating it, had just taken the cards that he used most of the time and just penciled in what the depths were instead of fixing the machine. It's just like, yeah, okay, for a Schlag, it's like halfway off between each thing.
Just move those goalposts a little bit.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
go in and fix that, and the owner of the shop is like, "Hey, would you be interested in doing some more work for us?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." You know, I'm not doing a whole lot of trade myself because at the time I didn't have a ton of money, and advertising as a locksmith in New York City is not cheap or easy to do. And so, you know, most of my business was sort of word of mouth, which, you know, led to some nice jobs, but doesn't make a ton of money, and it's hard to keep a ton of stock when you're operating like that.
Right.
But a couple months later, the guy who had gotten me the introduction to that shop was like, "Hey, you know what? I'm moving. I'm leaving town. Would you be interested in taking over my position full time?" I was like, "Oh, yeah, I guess. I'm not doing that much trade on my own. So sure." Talk to the owner, and he hires me on, and that's
cool.
That's how I had gotten the job that I had been doing for up to the early days of the pandemic, and then obviously the last year or so has been a bit tough. I'm still working at that shop part time now, and hopefully when things go back to some sort of normal and we can all go out and do manual trades safely again, I'll be back there full time for a while anyway.
Yeah, well, that's really cool. You know, I think, you know, I think I knew most of that story just, you know, from having talked to you and read some things and heard some things here and there, and you know, pieced it together. But you know, I think everybody out here watching today really appreciates that. You know, and is cool because I've actually got another video in my little vlog series that I'm doing. I've already recorded it. I recorded it the other day, but I'm going to upload it probably tomorrow. Sort of talking about kind of the my thoughts on going from locksport to locksmith. So, but it's cool to hear that from, you know, from somebody else, especially somebody who's, you know, very well known in the community like you are. And but yeah, that's really cool.
I still find it a bit weird sometimes that I'm sort of internet famous.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everybody's got to get started somehow.
Yeah. No, I
You know,
think
it
I really think that Locksport really has helped uh, develop this new generation of locksmiths because where you have certainly when I was younger and growing up, the established locksmiths were very much not receptive to bringing in outsiders and teaching
right.
them a trade. And it still gets me sometimes when I in the trade magazines like, oh, where's the new generation coming from? It's like, well, you guys kind of kept everyone out for the last couple of decades. You spent all this time telling people who were interested in the trade to take a hike and refusing to
Right.
do anything. So now it's all these other people who had to figure out all this stuff on their own. They're now the ones that have the skills to take over, and that's kind of a situation that you created.
Right. Well, I was lucky a couple weeks ago, when I was at Walmart one morning, and happened to see a guy. I think I talked about this last week too, but there was a guy there, and obviously he was doing locksmith work to one of Jason's favorite things. A It wasn't quite a roll down gate, but it was a side to side gate. Um, I haven't watched your video yet, Jason, on that, but that's on the list to watch today. Um, but anyway, I stopped and said, hey, you're a locksmith, and he said, yeah, and we talked for a few minutes, and he said he's been doing it for about 50 50 some odd years, and I was surprised when I asked him. I said, do you have an actual shop and that's open? And he said, yeah. He said, come by and talk to me sometime. And which is interesting because the other locksmiths that I've met since I got into this have been, yeah, I've got a shop, and one guy who actually had a shop, he's um I had ran into him through the course of work a couple times, and he was the one who told me that it is completely impossible to pick a medico. And of course, that's why I did that whole video a while back where I picked a medico on live. um, but his shop's just kind of a hole in the wall shop, and he wasn't there very early. So yeah, I think that the I agree with you. There's not a warm reception with some locksmiths, and you're lucky if you can find a locksmith who is out there and willing to share with you and teach you, or at least invite you to come by and just sit down and chat with them for a while. And that's something that is few and far between, I think. Which is why this whole community that we have on YouTube and Twitter, and some degree over on Reddit. Although there are characters on Reddit, we all know which one I'm thinking of. If you've gone to the locksmith subreddit, but just to have basically good helping people who try to pass along knowledge and help newcomers. And if it weren't for that, I wouldn't be here, um, and wouldn't have spent the last while with my nose buried in that study guide until I'm cross-eyed. I had I had to set it down some yesterday and the day before, just reading it. I had some time at work, and I was reading over the automotive section, the administrative code section, which there are a lot of questions on that, on the test as well. So yeah, you just kind of have to study, but it really helps, especially like me, where I can read and absorb the information that I read, but it's nice to have somebody echo that back out and sort of test me on it, which I think is sort of what we've been talking about doing, at least for a little bit today, and
Yeah.
we've got some time left. So um, if I do want to stop and say um, welcome to everybody who's in the chat. I've said welcome to a few of you in the chat while we've been sitting here talking, but I thank you again for everybody joining in. In case if you missed it, Night Owl is the special guest today, and we're going to be doing some studying because I have exactly one more Saturday between now and my test. So 2 weeks from now is when the state license test is going to be going on, May the 1st. Kind of wish that first Saturday fell on the 4th. Uh, for all you Star Wars fans out there, that would be awesome. But anyway, so Night Owl, what do you have to bend my brain and make me feel completely unprepared for this test?
So first off, let's start with what is VATS? VATS.
VATS is the Vehicle Anti-Theft System, and it is a system that disables power to the ignition and fuel pump if you are using the wrong key.
Correct. And do you know how it functions?
That in principle, the VAT system, you have a resistor chip that is in the bow of the key, and it is read by the ignition, by a sensor near the ignition, and that resistor code is unique to each vehicle. And if basically if the circuit or current put through it doesn't equal what it should, then your fuel pump's not going to turn on. So if even though you might create a perfect duplicate, if you don't duplicate the resistor or program a new resistor for a new key or a secondary key, then it's not going to work, even though it might turn in the lock.
Yeah, pretty much. Actually, the funny thing is that the number of unique resistor values in the VAT system is actually fairly small. So you're kind of just hoping that the combination of the mechanical key bitting and the basically the resistor value just adds an extra, the equivalent of an extra cut to your key space.
Cool. And it would be, well, I better not say what was just about to come out of my mouth. Yeah, you probably know what I'm thinking. As far as
yes, I think.
Yeah, I'll let me send it to you in the chat on our private. This isn't through the YouTube chat. This is through the Zoom chat, which I don't believe is visible.
But while you are doing that, let's see. Going through here.
There you go.
So, what is a secondary key, And where would you expect to encounter a system using it?
Secondary key, talking about vehicles still, right? Automotive.
Yep.
Okay. Secondary key would be a key that would operate the door locks, the trunk, or the glove box, or all three of those, or a combination of those, but not operate the ignition itself.
Yep.
Cool. And it would have some with some vehicles, it would share some of the bitting with the ignition key, but not all of it. So in potential, you could use that to maybe help decode an ignition key. Or am I thinking too far on that?
A little too far. There are certain cases, I know we were talking about some of this stuff before we went live, where you have, or actually, I think we discussed it early on in the live, where you have some systems like Ford 10 cut, where there are a couple of overlapping values, and then like half of the key is unique to the doors and half is unique to the ignition.
Right. I guess that's where I was kind of thinking of something like that. Okay.
Yeah, so let's see.
And lockpicking, Scal, just to reply to your comment in the chat, flashcards. Yeah, I would love flashcards, but honestly, what would be really nice to me is if there was a audiobook version of the study guide. That would be so cool. I can learn anything listening to it while I drive. But anyway, just had to mention that.
Yeah, so for Ford 10 cut, you have a code that is made up of 3 digits, a letter, and then 3 digits. In those cases, if you are rekeying or switching out locks, what do you have to, which part of the code do you have to make sure matches between the door locks and the ignition lock in order to allow single key functionality?
For the Ford 10 cut, you said?
Yep.
Okay.
So the study guide gives the example of 147A501 as the code. And there's one part of that code that has to match between both sets of locks in order to allow one key to operate both the doors and the ignition.
I barely remember that. I did glance over it, but this is going to be a pure guess, really. And I'm going to say it would be the letter that you would have to match up.
That is correct.
Okay.
The way the Ford 10 cut codes work is you have for instance, in the example that they give there, you have 147A would be the code for the ignition, and that gives you the 6 cuts that are specific to the ignition. And then you have A501 for the door locks. That gives you the 6 cuts specific to the door locks.
Gotcha.
And when you mash them together, The letter is what represents the overlapping cuts.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I remember in the guide, and I don't have my guide out here. I'm not secretly flipping through the pages. But I remember yeah, that would make me sound really smart, wouldn't it? But no, I remember like one of the example diagrams where they have like, these cuts over like printed over here, and then these cuts printed over here, and then you have like these two that overlap in the middle that are the same. And I know my fingers do a horrible job of representing letters and numbers printed on a page, but yes, I remember that diagram in there. So I think we've got time left for a couple more questions.
Okay. Let's see.
Nick, it can be just anything that you pulled out, maybe not just automotive, although automotive's where I've been feeling the shakiest.
Yeah, well, I've got, let's see, I think one more for automotive. So on GM cars, if the keys are not available, what are your options for opening the trunk lock?
On a GM for opening the trunk lock.
When the keys are not available.
I remember reading something like that, but I have no clue what the answer is. Obviously in the real world, your options are going to be to try to use, like, if you had a Lishy tool, you could use it. You could obviously try picking it if you had, picks for the automotive. Or I guess depending on the year and model, there's probably a bypass, like under the trunk lid tool.
So,
or impressioning.
So what the guide says, and here they're assuming that there is no bypass.
Okay.
The options that they list are to, 1, destroy the lock. 2, have a code available so that you can cut a key. Or 3, disassemble one of the other compartment locks and then use progression to decode the remaining cuts that were not used on the trunk lock.
Gotcha.
And that's assuming that that you're dealing with the older key series lock system that used a primary and secondary key.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, because
some sort of picking or something might be possible, but that's going to be down to the specific type of lock. If you're dealing with a lot of these sidebar locks, then you're going to have a really difficult time. Not that it's impossible, just that it's very difficult to pick. And that's, of course, this is mostly applying to the older locks where you could actually call up GM or one of the other companies that offered key codes by VIN number or some other mechanism.
Right. I think that's what what Jason just referenced to in the chat. And
Yeah.
just a reminder to the folks out there in the chat, there is a 30-second delay between our video and the live chat. I guess I should have mentioned that towards the start. But anyway, yeah, I remember Jason talking about that in the past where on the older GM cars you could call and get a code based on the VIN. And I know there are services still similar to that today, but I know that they are fairly costly to even to the locksmith to use, where you can get
those services are getting fewer and further between, and they have never been free. They are certainly very costly now, which is a big part of why automotive lockout and key programming and stuff is a bit expensive. Is that the companies that control access to the factory codes and the programming codes and everything have found that it is much more lucrative for them to charge you by the key, by the lookup.
Well, and I also
the same is true of like Sentry Safe and the other low end safe makers, where you can call them up for a factory reset code or something, where they do have a lookup table, but unless it's in one of the really old read code books or something, they're gonna charge you for that information.
Right. I actually know somebody who had to go through that a little over a year ago. They had a family member pass away, and I forget the brand of the safe, but basically to get it open, they had to call, and they also had to have law enforcement come to the residence to verify that it wasn't stolen. They had to send a copy of that report, a copy of the death certificate, send all that in, and then pay. I believe they were charged like $50 or something, and they got the master override code for it. So it is expensive.
It's a process, but I mean that's and I'm fairly sure if you go through the administrative code section of your study guide, you'll see there's a whole ton of stuff about what sort of documentation and what verification procedures you have to do as the locksmith.
Yep. There's anything like it does clearly say in there that anything where you're originating a key based off of like if somebody brings you a complete door lock that they took off of the door, and they want you to make a key for it the way that it is pinned, you have to verify their identity for one thing. You have to verify where it the property that it came off of, verify that the person bringing it to you has legal authority and access to that building, and to have a key to all of those locks. So that is a process, and quite frankly, that's something I would do anyway if even if it weren't required in the administrative code. It's one of those things. If somebody says, "Hey, can you make a key for this?" I'll say sure, and I will take it to the back, and I will dump the pins out, and I will key it to a new pre-cut, and charge them for it. And that pre-cut won't hopefully won't work any of the other doors. I'll make sure that it's not the same as the
yes, as long as it's a random pre-cut, then you should be reasonably okay.
Right.
Like the odds are in your favor if it's. I mean, what I do is, because we do a lot of a fair amount of commercial work at my shop. So when we, but most of the cylinders that we stock come pre-keyed from the factory. So when we rekey them to fit the customer's master key system or whatever specifications they have, we'll just take all the keys that came with it and dump it in a big bucket.
Yep.
So we've got probably at this point like 15 pounds of Schlage C pre-cuts. We've got another bucket that's a bit smaller. It's all the Aero pre-cuts and so on and so forth.
Right. And
we've even got Medico and multi-lock pre-cuts where we have the authorization cards and everything in a big bucket.
Okay. Well, that's pretty cool to do that. Yeah, I know Jason, he does the same thing, or he must have, because every time he sends me a box of stuff, there's always pre-cut keys in there. So
yeah.
And I appreciate that, because I don't have a code machine yet. And, so having those pre-cuts is nice. Saves some time. But all right, I think we have about wound up. Any last any last things, Night Owl? Like as far as questions or anything in the study guide that you picked up on, maybe that I should be maybe paying more attention to, or anything like that?
Nothing specific there. Like, you're obviously there's a few things in there just generally that you need to keep brushing up on a bit, but you're definitely making very good progress.
Well, I appreciate that. I've got, like I said, two weeks to cram it all in. I've had the study guide for about 2 years now. Just trying to reabsorb everything that I've read in it before, or go back to the parts where I know I've skimmed over and I need to reread, things in there. Anyway, but yeah, I really, really appreciate it. And I think we're going to go ahead and wrap on up now. Don's Lock is saying it's his bedtime.
Oh no. Yeah, we can't keep Don's up too late.
No, we can't. We got to let him get his beauty rest.
Yeah.
So Don's, if you're signing off, have a good rest of the night. I'm glad you got to make it. I'm going to try to do a video at some point in time, do a live at some point in time where it actually lines up with a convenient Australia time, which means I may have to see midnight for the first time in months. Anyway, so yeah, I will keep studying. Everybody else, I really appreciate you coming here. Yeah, Jason, I can see, the most ridiculous and mostly completely useless parts in the guide will be on the test, probably so. And I will try to send you that email. It will attach with like a Google Docs like drop. That's about the best way I have to send it. So I will try that email again here in a little bit. Yeah, lockpicking's gal. I might do that both for the study guide and the Bible, both for on the way to take the test. Anyway, appreciate everybody coming here. Night Owl, again, thank you for being here. And that is a very, very interesting cylinder with key that you just pulled out there. I think people will be interested in that.
I just had this sitting around.
Oh, of course, Night Owl would have something like that just sitting around.
It's too big. It's too big for the box that I usually keep my my nicer cylinders in. So
Gotcha.
the
Gotcha.
workbench.
That is very cool, and I'm sure maybe one day we'll see it on a video of yours. Um, but yeah, I appreciate it. And folks out there, if you know of anybody or would like to see anybody come on to live with me, or if you would like to come on to live with me, um, just drop me a note, email, comments below on this video. Or probably the most efficient way is a Twitter direct message. Um, I would love to have some more, you know, guests on here and make this sort of a regular thing, maybe a couple times a month or once a month, and get some people on here. And so let me know if you have any suggestions or if you're volunteering. Probably won't be anything else. Um, well, I'll still do some lives before the test because I've got one more Saturday, and then this coming week I will probably do a live on Wednesday evening. I will be working Wednesday during the day, so I thought about trying to do a short live Wednesday night, um, or early evening my time. Um, But anyway, I appreciate everybody showing up. Appreciate everybody participating. Night Owl, appreciate you being here. See,
Thank you for having me.
not a problem. Not a problem. Anytime. Lockpicking's Yal is suggesting that Jason should come on live with me. Jason, if you're up for that, just let me know. Um, but yeah, just I enjoy being able to do this, and Zoom actually does make it very, very easy to do. Um, so anyway, alrighty, folks. Well, we're going to go ahead and close it down for the day. We've got 55 minutes until Jason goes live, and so we'll go ahead and finish things up. So everybody a have a great day. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, and stay out of trouble. So we'll see you next time.